Hello to everybody just joining the show this evening. We'll give it a few minutes for everybody to dial in. It always takes a little while. We've got some pretty pictures in the background for you while you wait. It's making me feel a little bit less sad about being on a Zoom call for Valentine's Day by the fact we've got 150 other people joining us. So no judgment, because we're all in the same boat.
My wife was actually quite glad that I was doing this tonight, I think, so that she could have a little bit of time watching her own things on TV.
And I'm quite glad because I've got out of doing bath time. So everybody's happy. Oh, I'm just catching up on all the messages. It's always good seeing where everyone's from. Birmingham Island, Tallinn, nice, we like that. North Yorkshire, West Yorkshire right here. Ulverston, Canada, good, strong. Sheffield, Merseyside, Bristol, excellent. Thank you, Gary. It is a smart look. I forgot I had this event on. Okay. We're in the sort of 170 category. There's still people easing in, and I feel the pain of the few people who are going to creep in late and miss my wonderful introduction, but that is life. So first off, welcome to the Virtual Cycle Touring Festival, for those of you whose first event it is, and welcome to the big Valentine's Day debate, where 4 big hitters from the cycling world will be slogging it out in a romantic battle to the bitter end, as each team hopes to deliver the kiss of death to the other. I will be your host for this evening. I used to be an adventurer and I once cycled around the world, but now I'm an accountant, so I rely on events like this to make me feel alive. Please don't spoil that by pointing out the fact that I only got this gig because I'm married to the organizer. And besides, what else were we going to be doing on Valentine's Day? So it's not about me this evening, it's about these 4. A truly stellar lineup, some serious heavyweights. In fact, these guys are so impressive that they would usually get a standing ovation just for breaking wind. So the wall of silence that's greeting us right now is frankly a little unsettling, especially with the caliber of comedy that's coming right at you. So I'd like to get a little bit of crowd participation to start things off, and to check that I'm not just talking to 100 empty living rooms. So I'm going to hit you with a poll. A little survey. You weren't warned about this. It's not much of an exam. It's just a quick question. I'm going to ask you, what is worse, being locked down on Valentine's Day, or not being locked down on Valentine's Day and feeling like you have to do something romantic? So hopefully you can start seeing that question pop up on your screens. Okay, we're getting the responses in now, coming in thick and fast, almost up to 100. It's pretty close. It's neck and neck. It's like, I was going to say Brexit, but we're supposed to be having fun tonight. Let's move on. Oh, it really is 47-53 or 48-52. I'm tempted to stop it just there. This is a lot more tense than I expected this debate to be. I mean, the real thing's obviously going to be very exciting, but this poll, for an accountant, this is pretty good. Right, end polling. Hopefully, you can see the results on your screen. Yes, clearly a British audience. 52% have said it's worse to be having to do something romantic, and so that looks like people are quite happy being locked down. Wonderful, thank you. So now I know that you are in fact all real people, or at least well-programmed bots. I need to get a measure of where your hearts lie before we start this debate. So one final poll for my little introduction. Let me get to my next question for you, which is about tonight's topic. Which is better? I want to know what you think before you've heard from our expert witnesses. What's better, cycling solo, cycling as a couple? Again, it's pretty tense, pretty close. Okay. Last few votes coming in. Last couple of seconds, folks, before I reveal the scores on the doors. Okay, I'm drawing a line under it there. Right, You can see the results. So a slight lead for cycling solo. So Anna, Pete, you're a little bit up against it tonight. You've got a bit of an uphill struggle, but I'm sure you're up to the challenge. Right, so now we know the lay of the land. Let's meet the teams, starting with team couple. Alice Mcneil is the perfect advocate for the benefits of touring as a two, having spent her honeymoon cycling all the way from the UK to New Zealand. That's 2 years, 22 countries, and 22,000 kilometers of marital bliss, and those twos aren't a coincidence. She's a registered yoga teacher, a chartered physiotherapist, and mindfulness teacher, and a generally delightful human being. Joining Alice on Team Two to Tango is Sarah Ooten, one of the most impressive people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. Sarah spent 4.5 years traveling around the world by human power, rowing across the oceans, riding across the continents. And she was alone on her bike and her boat for months on end, making her endorsement of traveling twos a powerful one. Now, up against this formidable duo are two equally remarkable individuals, starting with Anna Hughes, an environmentalist, campaigner, and big believer in the power of the individual to tackle the climate crisis. Anna is also the author of 3 excellent cycling books, the first of which, Eat, Sleep, Cycle, is an account of a 4,000-mile ride around the coast of the British Isles, a journey she undertook solo. Anna will enjoy independent support this evening from fellow soloist Pete Mcneil, founder of bike touring company Adventure Pedalers. Adventurer, racer, qualified guide, and veteran of the Silk Road mountain race, Pete is one heck of a cyclist. However, his appearance on Team Solo tonight is somewhat controversial because, of course, he is married to Alice. Now, in a few heartbeats from now, the passionate debate will start. But first, some housekeeping, because nothing says romance like a little bit of admin. Chat, as hopefully most of you have gathered, for messaging each other during the talk, but make sure you select all attendees, not just panelists. Otherwise, if you're going to look a bit awkward when you comment on how dishy Pete Mcneil is, and he's the only one that sees it. Questions, that's questions to come to the panelists. So if you want to ask, for example, Sarah Ooten, will you be my Valentine? That's the place to do it. The answer is no, she's married, back off. But just so you know. Finally, you've probably gathered by now, everything's free to attend at the Cycle Touring Festival, but there's a suggested donation of £10 per household for the whole week. So if you fancy it, you enjoy it, and you're able to, then that would be very welcome. That is more than enough from me. It's time to hear from our contestants. Each team has prepared an opening statement to win your hearts and minds. So without further ado, it's over to Team Couple for their heartfelt appeal.
Okay, so welcome everybody. So starting off a team couple, right. I'll keep this brief because I know Sarah's got some things to say as well. So most important thing, as a couple, you eat better. Bottom line, you've got time to prepare the food because you're together, you share the tasks, you can even share carrying all the gourmet meals you're going to eat. You can share weight, for example, carrying a spice rack. So the quality of the food is just much better. Another reason would be you find more idyllic campsites. This might just be Pete, and he might argue that when he's solo, he does the same. But when we were cycling as a couple, he would make us find the most wonderful lunch spots, most wonderful places to sleep, sometimes making us push really quite hard to get to those idyllic places, which I cursed him for at the time, but then was rewarded. So if I was by myself, that wouldn't have happened. And then I guess another main pro for me is that you can get towed. So it brings to mind times of vomiting quite heavily in Uzbekistan, and Pete literally tying a bit of rope to me and towing me up the hills. So yeah, Sarah, if we'll carry on.
Thank you, team couple co-captain there, and hello to everyone this evening. Excited to be on team couple, and I have a few things to add to Alice's opening statements there. So number one, at times it feels safer to be in a couple. And I will say there, it doesn't have to be a romantic couple, it can be any other couple as well. In fact, most of my cycling's been with my with people who aren't my wife, people other than Lucy. So it can feel safer when you're as a two. There's two people to there's a chance, you've doubled the chance of the snake climbing up the bike into the other person's bike rather than yours, for example. And I think the other way in which in particular it feels safer to be as a couple rather than alone is the fact that, slightly different here, but when I was kayaking with Justine through bear territory, I slept pretty well at night. Whereas when Justine had gone home and I was now cycling on my own through bear territory, I would wake up in the night screaming myself awake because I was afraid that I was going to be carried off by a bear. So safety, good reason for being in doubles or more than doubles. Sharing, Alice touched on this, sharing food, sharing carrying of food and different things like this. I think sharing is an important part of being in a double, in a couple. You can share the decision making, so when it all goes tits up, it's not all your fault. That's quite nice. You can defer the decision making, and even the other person can make some of those decisions. Like Alice said, you can share kit and gear and spread the load. You can share experiences and memories. My solo stuff, well, that's just all in my head. Whereas the stuff I've done in doubles and couples, that's to be shared and enjoyed together. And I think a really brilliant example of how the load can be shared is from our good friends who I think they're on the call tonight, the Revolution riders, Alice Lemsip and Lee Craigie and Jenny Graham and Phil Batty. Well, they really shared the load cycling when they cycled from Edinburgh to Copenhagen a full year ago on cargo bikes, because when one of them was riding, the other one was having a cheeky snooze on the front. You can't do that if you're by yourself, can you? Or at least if you do try and snooze while you're riding, you're going to end up in the dust. So that can only happen as a double. And the final one I'd have, so we've got safety and sharing, I put caring down. In a double, you have someone to look after you and someone for you to look after as well. And the same goes for laughing at. You've got someone to laugh at and someone to be laughed at by. So when things go tits up again, it kind of softens the blow a little bit. I guess the upshot of that is when something goes wrong, you can be blamed by the other person too, but we'll gloss over that. So that is me wrapping up from Team Couple in our opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Team Couple. We've had a blistering opening there, not only referencing the ability to be lazy, we've got safety in there, we've got a reference to bears, and sharing and caring, we've got rhyming in there. So Team Solo, bring it on.
Wow, that is a lot to live up to. Shall I go first, Pete? Okay, so my three kind of main points for me. Firstly, cycling is a very physical activity, of course. It's very all-consuming in terms of your physicality and your mental state. So if you are hungry and you need to stop to eat, then that's obviously that really determines kind of the course of your ride. My body is going to be very different to somebody else's. So if you are cycling alone, you can just stop when you need to. You can stop to eat, you can stop to gawp at something, you can stop for a rest. The person who you might be riding with will have different needs, and these are so important. We must absolutely listen to our bodies and listen to our minds, and go when it's good and stop when it's not, and rest and everything else. But when you are by yourself, you can determine that for yourself. So it's really kind of being able to kind of pay attention to your absolute needs without having to compromise on that kind of stuff. Because if the other person isn't hungry at that moment, then you feel bad for wanting to stop, and then it's sort of, that means that you're going to put yourself in a bad place because of your consideration for someone else. So it's not kind of the sort of, I need to be really selfish here. It's just, I need to listen to myself, I need to listen to my body, I need to work out kind of how I'm responding to this ride. So that's number one. Number two, now this kind of gives a different angle to this. So cycling alone, most of my tours are solo, but that doesn't mean I'm always alone. So I could be joined by a friend for a couple of days, or maybe someone I meet on the road. We could cycle together for a few miles. So being like touring solo doesn't mean that you are always alone. It doesn't mean that you're lonely. It doesn't mean you don't have somebody else to bounce off or talk to, all that kind of stuff. So there are huge numbers of interactions, not even during the riding. It can be when you stop to have your lunch and someone comes up and you start chatting, or you know, you're going into the supermarket in whichever country you're in and you talk to somebody, or you cycle past someone's house and you ask them for directions and they invite you in for a cup of tea. All those kinds of things happen. So it doesn't mean that cycling alone means you are lonely or by yourself the whole time. So that's number two. And number three, I've written down, I am a control freak. So here it is. Confession time, I'm a control freak. And yeah, it does kind of, it doesn't matter how much you love someone. After a while, there'll be things that start to get kind of rattly, and there will be tension eventually. So yeah, I just kind of prefer to have that kind of vision, that soloistic vision, and being able to do something, yeah, I'm going to say it my way. So yeah, that's my opening statement. Over to you, Pete.
Hey, yeah, well, I feel like I'm on slightly shaky ground here, especially in relation to Anna's last point. Not least because I cycled for 2.5 years with Alice, but also because it's Valentine's Day and she's in the same room as me. So I'm gonna try and be as sensitive as possible. My first point is, obviously, you know, I cycled for a long time as part of a couple, but in the years after that, I've done a lot of solo racing, bikepacking racing, and riding further and faster than I would have dreamt possible in a couple. And that's not necessarily because the other person isn't physically capable of keeping up with me. It's more that I wouldn't choose to cycle with me when I put myself under those kind of stresses. And when you get really tired or really worn out, what we found as a couple was that then those niggles and those little arguments came out. Whereas when you're by yourself, you're completely reasonable to yourself for all of that sort of scenario. So for me, that longer, further, faster, what that facilitates is a really interesting space, and it's a psychological headspace, because you get your head down, you get into a rhythm, you don't have to think about anyone else, and then you start to sort of integrate into the landscape, I would say, is probably my best way of describing it. It's that kind of like blurring of the boundaries between sort of you know, what you're thinking about and what's going on around you. My second point is that, probably related to the first, is that I don't have to convince anyone else to come along with me, and trying to organize other people to kind of like be available at the same time that you want to go and do something, or be up for it in the same way as you are. All you have to do is leave the front door, and then you can be out and you can be riding, and you can make that decision in, you know, a much shorter period of time if you don't have someone else to consider. And then my third point is slightly more related to Alice, but you don't get in trouble if you ride off with the pannier that has the biscuits in it, which is definitely something which has happened to us. And yeah, definitely, yeah, whilst it's great that you can share the load, there's some things which you definitely need to kind of have some of each. And so yeah, that kind of that concludes my statement.
Thank you to both of you. We've got some strong comebacks there. We've got a pitch for almost, you might describe as for selfishness, but let's be honest, as any good politician knows, selfishness wins votes. And also reference the biscuit pannier. So I think we've got a fight on our hands this evening. Sarah, Alice, please do feel free to rejoin us in the world of online video, because I think you've heard the response to your introductions, and I would like you to give you both an opportunity to respond to anything that you've heard.
Okay, given that Alice does seem to have been lost in cyberspace there, I'll take the lead for team couple this time in rebutting to our Right Honourable Friends Team Solo 1 and 2 very impassioned statements in favour of selfishness. I mean, Anna made that brilliant point about being able to pay most attention to your own needs whilst being solo. And I'd say that's a very valid point, except it feels even more valid to me, as we've noted in a few of the chat notes there, that if you're with another person or people, other people can pay attention to your needs too. You can be looked after. I know that Lucy, my wife, needs to eat when she starts turning into an angry witch, which she, in that angry witch state, is often blind to. So paying attention to the needs of others and having your own needs attended to by others, I would say, is a brilliant reason for doubling up. And let's see here. Oh, also, this is an interesting one. So our Right Honourable friend Pete positing that the longer, further, faster mission is easier while soloing. I would say I have somehow defied the odds here, in that my experience of travelling through the harshest conditions that I've been in across northern Canada in the winter, not northern Canada, that's bollocks, the bottom of Canada, North America is what I'm trying to say, in the winter at sort of -30, and across the Gobi Desert at the other end of the scale at sort of 50 degrees. I was coupled up in those with a wonderful Chinese guy in China and my now wife across North America, and I would posit that I travelled further and faster because I was part of a duo. I had someone else looking after my needs. I had someone else making me laugh when I tipped all of dinner over the floor and there was no more left, or when my tire exploded for the second time that week. So I would say that coupling up allows longer, further, faster in that. So I'll pass over to my my good friend co-captain Alice to add in with her rebuttals there.
Okay, so yes, I think kind of the whole idea about listening to your body and eating when you can and need to, I think absolutely I agree. But as a couple, you can be supported in that. So your couple could be already buying lunch and sorting out lunch ready for you when you've kind of bonked a little bit, and rescue you from that. They can also carry the nuts, so you can cycle a little bit further to catch up with them to get said nuts, or whatever your snack of choice might be. Okay, I'd say as a soloist, being joined by other people, yeah, but you also get joined by other people as a couple. And actually being a couple, you may attract different people. And in that kind of coupleness, I suppose, another person or more than people riding as a tribe can suddenly become kind of a lot more social experience as well, as a couple as well. Yeah, control freaks, I won't say too much about Pete. But I would say that if you were planning on cycling as a honeymoon, if it was 2 years, then perhaps you've got 10 years of marriage done there. 2 years, ups and downs, 10 years, completely done. You learn so much about the other person that it's fine for the rest of marriage. You're going to survive. I hope that's true. Okay, so now rebuttaling Pete. Well, to be fair, let me think. So Pete, does sell a very good story, but actually what we really know is that although he can push himself really, really far, he actually really likes stopping and having a cup of tea in a really nice place. And actually he does like to get a massage if he's like really aching. He does like somebody to wash up his pots for him. He likes to talk to people and share his inspiration with another person, all those insights and those deep meditations that you get into as a soloist. Well, you get those as a couple, but you can actually talk about them with somebody, you know, in some really deep conversations, which kind of consolidate that experience further.
It is all coming out now. The gloves are off, the knives are out, and I'm just really enjoying this description of Pete, the veteran mountain biker, enjoying his massages and his nice tea stops. So now you've taken a few blows, team solo, and you know what kind of fight we're in. Would you care to respond to your opponents' opening statements and indeed their rebuttals?
I think Pete needs to take quite a lot of this, actually. But shall I start
I
with?
wish I didn't.
Are you really in the same room? This is brilliant.
Yeah.
Can I? One of my rebuttals is to what Sarah said about safety, and so this is an interesting thing that I found as a solo female. I feel very safe when I'm on the road, even though in advance or even during, people say, "Oh, aren't you nervous?" Or "Oh, that's a bit dangerous," or "Try something easier, darling," kind of all those kinds of things. But actually, when you're on your own as a woman, people want to help you. And people really do. And they will, I feel so looked after when I'm out on the road, which is a wonderful thing. And so I never fear for my safety when I'm by myself. And I do, I mean, maybe I haven't had those kinds of Dervla Murphy whip a pistol from your knickers kind of situation. But it's never been an issue for me. Riding as a solo female, I've always felt very safe on the road. The difficulty comes if I have cycled with a male who happens not to be my partner. People always assume we're a couple, and yeah, people kind of maybe overlook me or expect him to be the fast one or the strong one or the one who knows everything, or the person who kind of has it all sussed, and I'm like, hello guys, I'm kind of don't overlook me sort of thing. So yeah, that's something that I've experienced on the road. And yeah, just to say what Pete said, actually, I know this is supposed to be a rebuttal, but I'm just going to support what my co-pilot said about I wouldn't choose to cycle with me. Oh my God. Right. That exactly sums up my last ride through France, actually. And I was supposed to do it with a friend of mine, and I was so heartbroken. She broke her wrist about 2 months before we were supposed to leave. Oh, no, maybe it was closer than that. It was closer to the departure date. Yeah, she broke her wrist, so she couldn't come with me. And so this was a cycle from Dieppe to Nice. So 1,000 miles, I think that was in the end. But the main part of this was to cycle up Mont Ventoux on the way 3 times in one day. So if anybody's heard of this, this is called Les Sanglés du Ventoux. There are 3 different roads up the side of the mountain Mont Ventoux, which is in Provence in France. It's often used in the Tour de France, sometimes as the finishing stage. Oh, what are they doing to these guys? But yeah, if you cycle up each one of the 3 roads in a 24-hour period, you join Les Clubs de Sanglés de Ventoux. And so I had this in mind, that this was going to be my challenge, but of course I'm going to ride my bike there to start with, right? And then I'm going to carry on to the Med to have a nice relaxing celebratory swim in the Mediterranean. And I had planned to do this with a friend of mine, and yeah, as I said, that she had broken her wrist, so she couldn't come. And I really missed the fact that we would have done it together. It would have been such good fun, but I smashed the miles. But mostly, like, I'm not saying that to boast. I mean, I punished myself. I got up out of my tent before sunrise every day, and the sun had gone down by the time I camped every night. And I was thinking, I could not put someone else through this. I had bitten off more than I could chew, which is most of my rides, to be honest. And I just thought, I can't put someone else through this. This is why I do better cycling alone. Anyway, over to you, Pete. Time to save your marriage.
Yeah, okay. Well, like, I'm gonna take it from a different angle, just to draw on the point that you eat better when you're as a couple. Now, this might be true, or this might be what you believe to be true, but the reality is that when you're there with someone else, there's someone else to judge how much you're eating. So when you stop at the petrol station at the side of the road and the only ice creams are available in a 5-pack, it's okay if you sit there and eat the lot yourself if you're by yourself. But if there's someone else watching you do it, it suddenly becomes something which is not okay. So like that I think is a like, you know, being able to indulge these things that no one else ever has to know about. I think that's a really good part of cycling alone. Also, a point, I think, that the feral nature of cycling alone. And now, like, you know, Alice and I, we've had plenty of long periods of time without a wash, but still you are on some level trying to impress someone. Whereas when you go when you go for multiple days without washing, I think that there's a sort of pride in that, that you can get away with it when you're by yourself, whereas the reflection that you have from someone else, just it takes the shine off and makes you feel a little bit guilty for being quite as feral as you're being. So I think the joys of being feral is another one which I would say is a plus point for being solo.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Okay, we've got a good bit of teeth into each other here, which is what we all look forward to on Valentine's Day. I didn't really think that comment through, so have a think on that while I move on to the next topic. I'm going to give you a moment to respond to each other's rebuttals, rebuttal of a rebuttal. But whilst you're also thinking about that, I'm also curious to. We've heard arguments and logic and rationale from each of you, but so hearts and minds are often won by stories and anecdotes. And I'm wondering if anyone here can think of a time or an incident where Team Solo, you were on your own and you were really thankful for it, or heaven forbid, you were with someone else and regretted it, and vice versa for Team Couple. I'm interested to hear some stories. So has anyone got something springing to mind, or did anyone have an urgent point they wanted to sling back in the face of their opponent? Anna, was that a hand raised?
I have a story there. Shall I just go straight in with the story?
Do it.
It's really sad. Am I allowed to do that on Valentine's Day? Can I have a downer for a second, guys?
Yes, please. Yes.
Actually, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to plug my book. Right. So Tim mentioned I've written 3 books. Here they are. Obviously, don't appear in front of the camera without all your books. So this is the first book I wrote, which is about my 4,000-mile solo cycle ride around the coast of Britain. And if you read it, you can find out that I had a boyfriend when I left for this ride. And I kind of concluded the story of my boyfriend by saying, I didn't know what was going to happen. We'd have to find out what happened when I got home, all that kind of stuff, just wait and see. So we did get back together after I got back from my ride. And we had a lovely couple of years together. And then we decided to go cycling through France. We went down to Portsmouth, I think, and cycled onto the ferry hand in hand, and it was all very romantic. And we'd taken a tent. So this is where actually the kind of sharing of the load really worked. He carried the tent poles, I carried the canvas, blah, blah, blah. It was really good. He had the caligas and the, little stove thing. And we spent 5 days, I think, cycling through Normandy and the northern parts of France. And when we crossed the channel back to England, we were no longer a couple. So that's my kind of, there could have been many other things wrong with the relationship, but that was a cycle tour that started in a lovely place and ended in a not very happy place. So yeah, maybe that's where my kind of love of solo cycle touring comes from.
Brilliant. I'm pleased that you've gone there, Anna. It's Valentine's Day and you've not pulled any punches.
I know.
Cycling
Let's have the
as a
weepy
couple.
Ones.
Don't cycle as a couple. It'll end your relationship.
I'd like
Anyone coming back from that,
with
Alice?
positive.
Come on, Alice,
So-
restore my faith.
So when we were on our honeymoon cycle trip, we were in Greece and it was coming up to Valentine's Day, and so I was like, you know what, I'd love to actually have a shower. It would be so nice to stay somewhere. So I wrote to a few kind of guest houses and said, oh, kind of any chance you can do us a discount? We're on a honeymoon cycle journey. We're cycling from the UK to New Zealand this honeymoon. Oh, it'd be really nice to come and stay with you. And I got a response from a hotel in Paxos, if you're ever there. And they said, oh yeah, come and stay here. And so we got there and we're thinking, oh gosh, we don't know how much this is going to be, but I'll sod it. We'll turn up and we'll do it, whatever. It's Valentine's Day. And so we got taken to a private bedroom with a shower, ensuite, bottle of wine, cheese, all the trimmings. And Pete took me out for a kebab that night. It was lovely. And in the morning we were like, oh, that's not a euphemism. And then the next morning we were like, oh, we found out they'd given us this hotel room for free, which was just phenomenal. It was so generous. In the morning we like, right, we're going to go and have their massive buffet and spend some money with them, because this is just too much to give us this really beautiful boutique room for free. And so we went and had this massive buffet, all we could eat. And yeah, again, they wouldn't let us pay for that either. And they just kind of made us feel so loved and so welcome to be there. And that was because we were as a couple on Valentine's Day.
That is amazing, Alice. Do you think if I went in with a friend and told them we just got married, we could get the same treatment?
Who knows? If you go to Hotel Acti in Paxos, you never know.
To be honest, it's worth a try. Actually, that's quite a good tip. Like, if you're ever cycling, like on Valentine's Day, just give it a go, because
grab the nearest
sorry,
guy. Hey, we just
Actually, no, just being on a honeymoon, whether you are or not, I don't know how ethical that is, but we got so many doors open to us by being on a honeymoon. It was incredible, like little Italian grandmothers, and we'd be like, oh, Luna de Miele, and sorry, terrible accent, I'm sure. And they'd be like, oh, Luna de Miele, and give us coffee and chocolate and things. And oh yes, you can camp in our garden. So I think the traveling as a honeymoon as a couple can kind of warm people's hearts a little bit more, because it's a nice story, it's a nice narrative as well that people can be part of, which is lovely.
So I'd just like to perform a bit of a rebuttal here, and like all that is absolutely amazing, and obviously I think it's fantastic, but that was on a kind of a trip that was life. So like, a long-term trip where you're kind of just settling into the rhythm of cycling and all this sort of stuff. With the sort of short bikepacking trips, maybe going away for 2 or 3 days, my reason for doing that is to not meet people. I want to get away from people during that period of time and just allow myself that bit of headspace, because like, how often do we have that time to be able to just just rattle around in your own head for a little while, or notice more things in nature. So I would agree, other than when you're on those like short little trips that provide the kind of the breaks from normal life, where actually it's much nicer not to have to meet people or deal with any kind of hospitality.
Thank you. Just going to say, Pete and Alice proven they are actually married and in the same room, because we get a little bit of echo when one of you're both off mute and speaking. Thank you, you three. Sarah, did you have any little stories or any points you wanted to come back on?
I was going to come back with a little rebuttal from our right honourable friend Anna in Team Solo there, talking about the feeling of safety as a solo cyclist. The one time where I did not feel safe as a solo cyclist was because I had ignored the advice of local truckers, namely because I didn't understand the language they were speaking. And I have a lovely bit of footage of me going to the camera, well, they've just told me not to camp down this road tonight by myself, but do they know what I've been doing all this time? And the next bit of the camera comes on and it's me in tears going, I've just been chased by this man. I think if I'd had somebody else with me, we could have made a joint decision about not going down that road at that time. And we would have felt safer in that respect. So I'll say that being in a double allows somebody else to help make the safe decisions too, and tied into that going down the road that the truckers told me not to happened shortly after I'd finished cycling with the lovely Gao in China, where he was responsible for decision making, partly decision making, sharing and so on. His initial words to me when he declared he wanted to turn my solo bike trip into a double bike tour was, Sarah, you can be the leader, I'll be the guide and the translator. So this wonderful split of roles and so on into the mix there. And in fact, one day we were invited, well, many times we were invited to join people as a couple being hosted. And this one particular day, we thought we were going to dinner with a guy and his family, and it turned out he'd set on this elaborate feast with all his pals, and as guests of honor we were the ones treated to trying out the delicacies first, like the sheep's head on a plate and things like that. And I didn't understand anything of what was being said really, because my Chinese was not fluent enough to join in with everybody. And Gao was laughing at one point when we went to the toilet, and he said, so and so asked me how we met, and I told them that we're boyfriend and girlfriend and we met online. We've been dating for 2 years or something. So he'd constructed this whole story about how we were a couple without me even knowing it. So I'm not really sure what I was saying there, but apart from doubling up, you've got someone else to help keep you safe and entertained.
Excellent. Go ahead, Pete. Go ahead. You don't need me.
Yeah, just as a quick counter to that, actually, that kind of like people talking you out of doing a stupid decision. That sometimes you don't want to be talked out of making a stupid decision, and so I'll draw on an experience I had. This might seem positive to people or not, but the final day of the Highland 550 bikepacking race a couple of years ago, I rode for 36 hours straight. And there was a period at about 11 o'clock at night coming into Glen Affric, where really I knew that I had to stop, and I knew that I had to kind of have a break and bivvy down for the night. But there was something in my head, I don't know if it was just the music I was listening to at the time or something, but something that made me just think, what happens if you just carry on going? Wouldn't that be interesting? and I listened to that little voice, and sure enough, if anyone else had been with me, they would have probably told me it was stupid. But that night, probably one of the strangest experiences of my life of riding through kind of hallucinations and awesome landscapes, and just with the sun coming up in the morning, is now one of the experiences that I will never, ever, ever forget. Now, I would have been equally as happy bedding down and getting sort of a good night's sleep, but I wouldn't have remembered it quite as well if I hadn't have just ignored the sensible voice in my head and carried on going. So, there's advantages to not being sensible sometimes, I think.
So what I'm taking from this is being a couple, better for being sensible. Being solo, better for hallucinating, is the sort of the take home. I don't know how that's going to sway the votes. I'm just summarising what I'm hearing here. I've got one of the questions.
I could argue with that.
I'll fire out my question, and I'm curious to hear how you hallucinated as a couple. one of the questions coming in, which relates to some of the things that come up, is about cycling solo and the difficulties, or maybe possibly even the risks, of perceived risks, of cycling solo as a woman. And I'm curious to hear, Sarah, you just given one anecdote, but obviously you went around the whole world solo and came back. And Anna, your thoughts on that, and indeed Alice, from any of your experiences cycling solo as a woman.
I remember about 3 years ago. Do you remember the days where we used to meet up with people and like do stuff in real life? Way back when. It was about 3 cycle touring festivals ago, and I was on the panel with you, Sarah, talking about cycling as a woman. And oh no, maybe it was the year before that. We'd done it a couple of times, and I remember the people who were on that panel, cycling as a woman, we kind of arrived a little bit early for our talk and overlapped with the end of the cycling as a man talk. And they were talking about machetes and like hatchets in their panniers and all this kind of stuff. And we were like, we were just going to talk about, I was going to say hairbands then. That sounds a little bit sexist, doesn't it? I don't mean that. But it just, none of our talk was about defending yourself, because that just doesn't happen, you know. And when I say that just doesn't happen, of course, I'm not saying that kind of thing wouldn't ever happen. And I have seen actually in the chat that someone has shared a story when they were attacked. So obviously that's a very unfortunate occurrence. And yes, that is the reality of being out there and alone sometimes. But yeah, it really struck us that it hadn't even crossed our minds to talk about defending oneself. It really was just kind of, you know, how do you cope with your monthly cycle? How do you cope with it wasn't even that. I was going to say washing your hair, but both of those things sound like really kind of stereotypically feminine. But it was just sort of, just go out there and do it, girls, kind of thing. It was very empowering. Anyway.
Anyone else want to chip in on that? Otherwise, I've got plenty more questions up my sleeve coming up from the audience. Any other comments on that? Okay, I'm firing in with a quick one, which I know at least half the panel can answer. Have you ever considered tandeming?
Yes, considered tandeming, but my wife won't let us. We were given a tandem for our wedding and we've had to sell it because she won't let me go on the front, and she doesn't want to be the leader at the front because she likes the brakes too much, which is so interesting because driving a car, she's like flipping Lewis Hamilton, but on a bike, so yes, I still dream of a tandem journey one day. But it's not going to be with my wife, I don't think.
So I think cycle touring with a tandem is actually a pretty big win for Team Solo. Having cycle toured on a tandem from Kathmandu to Sydney, it is not the best machine to ride. It's wonderful in the sense that, well, firstly, you can't ride off with the biscuits. Secondly, you can have conversations whilst you're riding along. That's pretty good. And also you pretty much are celebrities in every town that you go into. Everyone wants to, come and meet you because you're the crazy people on the tandem. However, it is extraordinarily heavy. Going uphill is an absolute nightmare. If you have to take it upstairs or put it on a train or get it on an aeroplane or do anything that isn't riding the tandem, it is about 5 times harder than doing it with 2 solo bikes. Now, but I'm sure loads of really hardcore tandem enthusiasts are gonna come up and slate me for this, but I just don't think that they're very good for cycle touring. And I don't know if Alice could counter that in any way, because before the chat here she just described staring at Pete's sweaty back for 1.5 years, and not to mention cycling through Southeast Asia with a bunch of spicy food. So Alice, if you can counter that, come in.
Okay, well, okay, so yeah, I had to stare at his sweaty back for a long time. we coined the fart vortex, where if he did pass wind, there'd be a whole vortex of air that it would just stay there, and you'd end up smelling him for a long time. I don't know if everyone else has experienced this. And that was the good points. They were wonderful. No, cycling across Australia on a tandem was absolutely magnificent, because there were long flat roads and you could just go for it, and you could be in synchrony with each other, and you could just make miles to get to the next water point, and kind of just go for it and feel this real sense of moving through the landscape, which if we'd been on individual bikes, we probably would have been less matched. Whereas on the tandem, we both got to put our power through, especially with the really fierce headwinds as well. So I think against the headwind, tandem riding is definitely a plus.
You've heard both sides of the coin there about tandem riding, and you've also heard the phrase fart vortex for the first time, I suspect, for most of us.
I wonder if I could just jump into the fart vortex there, Tim, please.
Far be it from me to stop you.
Okay, so just really following on from that, having spent a lot of time very much solo in my own fart vortices, if you can have plurals when you're solo, you know, trapped in a boat in the middle of the ocean, and also a lot of time in tents with others, be it my wife or not. I would say that whilst couple or double touring, whatever your mode of transport, that it's definitely an upshot in that respect to have two tents. So probably not a romantic sort of journey, but then the upshot of being in the same tent when you are, and this isn't what you might be thinking. I was going to say the upshot of being in the same tent when you are in a romantic couple, but it's not what you're thinking. It was more that when Lucy had managed to get a bit of frost nip on her toe at -40 whatever, because I was in the same tent as her, when she said, "Oh, I think something's wrong with my toe, I can't feel it," that I was there ready with my nudie armpit for her to thrust it underneath and come back to life again. But obviously the downside of that was being very much within the fart vortex. So I would say that is that's a good consideration if you're coupling, is to maybe have a couple of doors on the tent, or indeed separate tents.
Right, from farts to armpits. I told you it was going to be a high caliber stuff this evening. We are nearing the end of our debate. Just one last area I would like to explore for both teams is the one thing my wife Laura and I found was we thought as a couple it made us a bit more approachable. Like if we knocked on a stranger's door, they wouldn't just see me looking like a psychopath. They'd see, well, that person's hanging out with him, so he's less likely to be a psychopath. On the flip side, it did mean I think there was a risk that because we had company, we weren't quite so desperate to find other people to speak to. So perhaps we approached other people less. I wonder what each team thought of those sentiments.
I definitely think that you can be more approachable as a solo person. I do feel like if people see that you're in a couple, they think you're okay. So they just let you do it, even though you might not be okay, you know. But when you are a solo person, people will, and this might be a difference with being a man or being a woman, but yeah, if I have ever had need to knock on someone's door, then they want to help. And I don't have need to do that very often, but it's even beyond that, kind of just cycling past someone's house and they just start talking to you and invite you in for a cup of tea kind of thing. And this isn't just around the world, you know, this happens in the UK as well. You know, we're all very hospitable towards each other, really. And yeah, I kind of get the feeling that you are so unthreatening as a solo person, but more you're very approachable. That's what I found from my experience.
Yeah, I would look. I think there's huge advantage either way, but I think as a solo, generally speaking, the lows are lower. So you know, when things aren't going right and there's no one to fall back on, those pits of lowness can be much lower. But on the flip side of that, when you get those little rays of sunshine or the the random acts of kindness, or someone just tells you where the nearest squirrel hide that you can sleep in is in Kielder Forest. You saw, because of that, because you've kind of had a really rubbish time and you're by yourself and you haven't spoken to anyone for ages, then those little moments, I think the highs can be higher when you're by yourself. And so yeah, I think that's what I think about it.
I think also in a couple, I think you still get a lot of people kind of offering to help, and I think even we need to remember is if you are cycling as a couple, you can spend time separate, whether that might be kind of 40 meters or a few miles or a day apart at times, and so I think as a couple you get that experience of being solo and as a couple, because you separate and then you come together again, and so you can get the pros of kind of all the women in the Uzbek market looking after you, for example. Although on mine and Pete's cycle tour, I would be the one that got sent to knock on someone's door or to approach somebody in the market, or Pete would be hiding around the corner and then like, hiya. Not every time. So I think it's kind of like that team aspect. Do what your skills are, and do it for the team.
Yeah, I'd say joining in with that one. I suppose I have been invited in more often when I've been alone, but equally there's been times when I've been alone and people have wanted to join me or me to join them, and I've been really annoyed because I'm like, no, I'm enjoying my own space in my head, but have felt the need to go and be with them. But I do remember a time in the Canadian prairies at minus whatever, like really biting cold, and Lucy's bike had broken. And so we decided that we'd try and flag her a lift to the next place and I would cycle on behind. And we stood at the side of the road for, I don't know, half an hour or so trying to flag down a lift, but nobody would stop for the both of us. So I said, oh, look, why don't I hide and we'll see if someone stops. And moments later, somebody stopped. So it's not the most rigorous of tests, but it was interesting just how quickly somebody stopped when there was just one neon-clad sort of Michelin man flagging a ride with an upturned bike as opposed to two. So
that's a pretty killer argument for the other side there, Sarah. Thanks.
I know that. I know that. Well, I thought we were just doing sort of friendly chat about it too, but yeah. So there appears to be something wrong with the line there. I think everything I just said was untrue.
Right, folks, I'm aware we're pretty much coming up to time. So in a moment, I'll hand over to you if you have any final closing statements. Just a few points from me. I think I think my winners for sort of ruthlessness have to go to Team Solo. First, Pete, just for taking part against your own wife. Kudos. And Anna for giving the breakup story on Valentine's Day. Excellent. But Team Couple clearly winning on stories. They brought armpits, fart vortex, and various references to bears and Canadian prairies. You can't compete with that. So I'm going to hand over to the four of you for any closing statements. Team Solo, would Anna, Pete, do either of you are ready to pass on any last words?
I would just say that, so I saw a question in the chat from Debs and Joe, hi guys, about leaving the love of your life outside the supermarket when you have to go in. And yeah, actually that is a bit like the whole time you're running around the supermarket going, please don't be nicking my bike, please don't be nicking my tent, all the kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, you just lock it. It's fine. I mean, that's all I can say. You've heard about the breakup. You've heard about, you know, the control freakery. I think I'd better leave it there.
I think what I would say, actually, in all truth and seriousness, is that there's big advantages to both. And I think if you've never tried doing a cycle tour or bikepacking trip solo, I would absolutely recommend giving it a go, because I think you're missing out if you've not tried that. But likewise, you know, the stories and the fun that comes out of riding as a couple or with other people is also something which is not to be missed. And so like I think there's different trips for different times. It's easy to be kind of bar humbug and I want to be by myself, but actually, you know, probably some of the most memorable times I've had have been as a couple. But I would say give them both a go. Like if you've not done so, do it.
Thank you very much, Pete. Done a little bit of digging your way out of that hole as the call comes towards the end. Alice, Sarah, would you like to share your final closing remarks?
Okay, so closing remarks. I think, yeah, like Pete said and Anna said, there's pros and cons to kind of both sides of it. But as a couple, I think you can get the best of both worlds. You can be there for each other, the caring, the sharing, the carrying the load, the eating better food, the meeting new people. You can also have those deep introspective times, and you can cycle apart as well. And actually you can, if you are in a couple, like a couple, and say Pete goes off on a solo journey, when he comes back, I still get all the introspection that he had when he was riding. So actually for him, it's as if he's cycling with somebody, because he's got to be with them when he gets back home anyway. And then so I think actually cycling as a couple, it wins.
You soppy pair. Joining in with the I like both sides of both sides of the coin in terms of solo and not solo and coupling. I think the big draw for me about sort of doubling up, being in a couple to go off exploring together, is the shared memories and that kind of growing closer together through that time spent together. And whatever ruptures and things happen because someone's just spilt dinner on the floor or just been a grumpy little shit that morning, then you can kind of find a way to make it all better by tea time. And well, sorry Anna, about your experience, that didn't happen, but the sort of the sharedness, the shared memories, and coupling there can be with pals as well, you know. Doesn't have to be a romantic pairing either, and you get those memories for life, the shared experiences, the big belly laughs that you're always going to howl about, that kind of thing. So yeah, in praise of not being alone.
Thank you very much, panelists. We've gone all over the world this evening with our discussions. We've gone back and forth. We've not pulled any punches. The knives have been out, but at the end, we've had a little bit of reconciliation with each team recognising the merits of the other. But it's coming down to the wire, and I'm going to send you the final vote. Has team solo swayed you to the side of going out on your own, or has team couple won you over on Valentine's Day? Here's your chance to vote now. Votes coming in already. So as a reminder, at the start of this discussion, it was team solo had the edge of it slightly. So pretty much everyone's voted, 90% voted. Last couple of seconds for those of you still making up your minds. Oh, someone's on the fence. Gary, I knew you'd be on the fence. You've got to commit, buddy. You've got to commit. Right, 3, 2, 1. We're closing voting. Sharing the results with you all now. To me, it looks like we've either got some skilled debaters or we've got a soppy audience. I'll leave it for you to decide. But thank you so much to everyone for joining in with the debate. The four of you really enjoyed it. Thanks to everyone in the audience for your questions and your comments throughout. I've really enjoyed those too. If you've got any last questions, feel free to fire away. But all I want to say finally is just a reminder that these four have given up not just their time, but their Valentine's Day evenings to talk to you. It's all voluntary, so they can't hear your applause. So please show your appreciation in the chat room now. Thank you very much, the four of you. I'm hoping you four can see the chat messages pinging up. It's just going wild with lots of thank yous.
Yeah, amazing messages. Thanks, everyone.
Right, okay. I mean, I don't know about you guys, I've got about 23 minutes left of Valentine's evening based on my usual bedtime. So, so thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this evening. Thank you again to the four of you. I enjoyed it very much. So enjoy the rest of your evenings and hopefully see you at another event later in the week.
Bye,
Cheers,
everyone.
guys.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having
Bye.
us.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thanks.